welcome to our newest episode of Supernatural Iceland. This is an episode about warlocks, possibly the darkest stories that you will find when it comes to folklore in Iceland. Not only because the story themselves, they're very different from other folklores, which are often pretty aimless, or they lack structure and so on. But these stories about these warlocks, they are pretty good actually, and also quite complex. But the most scary thing here is basically it was so strong belief in the 17th century that a lot of people were burned. And you can see this is we are here now in the Witchcraft Museum. I'll come back to that. But this here is a map of all the places in Iceland where we had what we called a prosecution for magic or sorcery. If you look at this here, this is the Vestfirðir, and we are actually here, around here. Or was I here? I don't know. Anyways, this is Strandir, this is Ísafjörður, and this is where Patreksfjörður is, and so on. Doesn't really matter, but what matters here is you see the difference between here and the rest of the country. The reason basically is that in the 17th century, these places were very isolated, and these were very spooky scenarios where people lost their life or burned alive for sorcery, often with little than no evidence behind it to back it up. Also, almost all of them were actually male. There were 4 women that were killed because of magic, and even one of them was not executed for sorcery, but for actually killing a very young, small child by throwing it into a boiling pot. It was considered such a horrible act that she was actually said to have it was beyond human, basically. So they actually charged her for sorcery of all things. But you can see here in the museum, it's interesting. Perhaps doesn't mean much to you right now. But I'm going to show you just from random things. Just perhaps here. We have runes in Iceland, and these runes are incredibly important. These runes are magic, of course, if you do them correctly. And it's not only enough to do the runes correctly, you have to do a lot of very complicated process at the same time. This rune here, this stone, this is called the Invincible Boy, but in Icelandic it's Hulins Hjálmur. It means the helmet that makes you invisible. It's also we have often is quite different in Icelandic and English for some reason, but this means that those that can make this rune work, they actually will make themselves invisible. But let's go a little bit over again to the when it comes to what sorcerers were doing. A lot of these stories are actually connected to basically awakening ghosts, or these are zombies, some kind. And you can see this one is coming out of the grave here. And they, of course, they do these runes. It's very complicated, and there are procedures that you have to do. But it doesn't really become complicated until afterwards, because when the ghosts come out, you have to actually bend down and you have to grab him by the throat and strangle him until the ghost asks you to stop, and then he is in your power. Also, another thing that is often in these stories is that you have to ask the ghost, how old are you and what is your name? If the ghost is older than 13 or 14 years old, it means that you have to make it disappear again. Or not disappear, you have to tell him to go back to its grave. Because ghosts are incredibly strong, and if it's older than you are, for example, when you do this, he will definitely kill you. If he is a child, it's easier to handle him. This shows how spooky this is in some ways. If you go here, and this is perhaps the oddest spell of them all. You can see these pants here. I don't know if you need to blur this here, but so it goes. It's all fake. We call this nábrók or necropants. I just call them the pants of death. It seems to be a wrong translation. You can see this here. This is, for example, the magic stuff, like magic room that you have to make before you do this. What you do actually, you have to make a deal with a man that is alive, and he has to be willing to do this. And you ask him, I want to buy your legs after your death. Or like, I want to make a deal with you that I can use your legs after death. If he says okay, then you of course have to wait until he dies. He will be buried, and then you have to go in the night and you have to dig him up, and you have to skin all of his skin off his legs. What you do next, basically, is that, because this is not done, this is often very complicated, keep in mind. Then you have to go to a church, and this has to be a funeral, and there has to be a very poor widow. It is specifically stated that they have to be poor. So you wait until the priest, he is done with the speeches, and is about to go for the gospel. There is a gap between there. And while in this gap, you have to steal from this poor widow all of her gold. And what you do then, you take this gold and you put it here, the sack of the thing is basically, and you put it there with, of course, with the room. Then you basically dress it. You dress yourself into the pants, and the pants will grow with you with time. And it should happen quite quickly. So these pants will basically be your legs. And why do we do this? It's not for fun, actually. It basically means that the golden sack, the gold that you stole from the poor widow, will never be empty. And it will draw all money to itself, to this legs, if you want, and you will become rich. Now, here's the complicated part. When you're about to die, or like you're tired of being rich or something, and you want to get out of these pants, you can actually make a deal with someone. And then you have to talk to the person, and you have to ask him to go into the pants. And it's a little bit complicated thing to do, because when you do it, you have to take one pant leg off, and the other person have to put their leg straight into it. And then you take the other one off, and he puts his leg into that, and then it should grow quite quickly, and the spell will keep on going and keep on giving gold. So if you really want to, like, if you don't want to go for Bitcoin anymore, I mean that's crashing and so on, you can always go for the necropants, Bitcoin of the 17th century. A few things about just how the justice system worked in Iceland at this time. We had actually 12 judges at this time, and what they did basically is that you presented some evidence to them about the sorcery or whatever that would be, and they would go over it. And even in this procedure, if you would be accused of sorcery, you would even be like in the situation where people could have the option of saying like he's a good man, he would never be do any sorcery at all. If everybody liked you, you would never be in trouble with this. But if nobody liked you, and this is almost always the case when it came to the people who were sentenced, these men who were sentenced for sorcery, then there was no one that trusted themselves to vouch for you, if you will. And not all of them were basically burned. Only a few of these cases, there were like around 170 cases that were actually where people were accused of sorcery, and only 21 to 25 were actually killed, burned. But the most popular way to actually punish these people that were dabbling with sorcery was flogging them. And of course, Icelanders didn't have that much of material, raw material. So we basically just use wood, chains and wood. So this is basically what they used to actually whip them with. It was not a whip, but basically just these branches. And trust me, it's really bad to be flogged with this. So, I mean, I was trying to get Josie to help me with this, but she was not up for it. So, here's the thing, we're at the Witchcraft Museum. It's in Hólmavík, and if you want to actually come here, there are a lot of brilliant like details about all of these elements when it comes to the history of sorcery in Iceland, and many of it is so weird. It's just like it would take us a whole other just chapter in this episode just to explain to you what this is all about, and not all of it. It's pretty petty, most of this, to be honest. This is basically a rune to get. If someone steals anything from you, you can do this rune, and he will return it to you, and so on. And this is Tilbury. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it was a small monster that fed off the inner thigh of women, and this was there were not many stories about this, and they were just flat out weird. And of course the raven. It's always a raven. But I want to tell you another story about Sæmundur the Wise. He was he was a sorcerer, but he was a pretty kind of he was a kind man, basically. The folklore goes, and keep in mind, this guy actually existed in real life, and he was a scholar. He was probably the first Icelander that actually went abroad to study something, and his life was very different in reality than from the folklore. So just keep that in mind, of course. But the folklore goes like this. Sæmundur Fróði, or Sæmundur the Wise, he was always tricking the devil. Not only that, when he was actually studying, and they think he was in Germany or France, we're not quite sure actually. They are like, the language is a little bit complicated, but they think it's more likely that he was in Germany. And he was in this school that they call in Icelandic Svarti skóli, or the black school. This school was very, very odd. Like, think Hogwarts, but there is a difference here, because the devil himself is actually the headmaster here. So the school itself was a black castle. There were no windows anywhere. And the castle, like the pupils needed to be in the castle, and they weren't allowed to leave the castle while they were there for months, even years actually. Also, of course, this was like closer to 1100, so there were not much of a light. And therefore, it didn't really matter, because these books, they actually had like a burning scripture, like a red scripture that was like glowing in the dark, and therefore they could actually like read this stuff, whatever they were reading. But again, the thing is, a little bit of snow here. Let's see how that goes. But the thing is, of course. The thing is, of course, the devil was the headmaster. They didn't have to pay any money for being in this school, but the devil, he wanted one thing, and one thing only. The last pupil in the end of the semester, leaving the castle, his soul would be the devil's soul. He would take him, basically, and his soul will be with him for eternity. So, this was a pretty, like, bad deal. I mean, think, like, you have school loans. I mean, like, doesn't sound that bad anymore, right? But the thing is, in the end of the semester, Sæmundur Fróði and all of these schoolmates of his, they were very stressed to go out of the school. But Sæmundur was a brave kind of a guy. So he said to his mates, "You all leave, I'll be the last one out." So they all left, and they were, of course, very happy that Sæmundur was gonna give his soul away, I guess. But Sæmundur has a trick. He actually had a cape on him, put the cape on, but he didn't like tie it on himself, and he didn't go into the for the arms. So what he did actually, he went outside, but all of a sudden he felt like a hand ripping the cape off him, and then Sæmundur ran out of the school. The devil, of course, being the devil, he closed the doors with his mind power or something like that. But Sæmundur was quick enough, so he actually got out of the school, and therefore he tricked the devil. This was the first time. But there are other versions of this story, actually. One of those that I really love is that the devil doesn't seem to have been the smartest guy in the room, to be honest. He was outside Sæmundur, he was on his horse, and the devil came and he said, "Your soul is mine." But Sæmundur said, "But I'm not the last one out." And of course the devil said, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Well, check this guy out." And he pointed out his shadow. So the devil took his shadow, but when he realized that he had the shadow, Sæmundur rode away and got away, basically. It's said that after that, Sæmundur never had any shadows in his life, which is, I mean, who needs shadows anyway? But it's an odd detail, actually. Sæmundur did also trick the devil throughout his life. Later on, he tricked him by actually, he was talking to the king of Germany or France. The details are quite fuzzy here. And there the king said that he and two other Icelanders, they were going home and wanted to go home because of the town that they live in. It was like up for, like the leader had died, the chieftain or whatever, and the one that would go back could claim the town. So well, this is tiresome, man. This is a hunting cabin, by the way. So what happened then is basically that Sæmundur, like the king said, the one that gets there first to Iceland, he will not have to return to the school of the devil, I guess. So the boys actually went into a small competition. They were all competing or going back to this town in the south of Iceland. But Sæmundur had an idea. He actually found the devil, talked to him, and he said, "I'll make a deal with you. You still want my soul, right?" And the devil, being the devil, said, "Yes, of course, I want your soul." So he said, "How about a wager? You take me to Iceland, sail with me there, and if I will not get wet on the way, you can claim my soul. If I will get wet on my way, I will, like, you just gave me a free lift." The devil, of course, said, "Yes, of course. I mean, that's a very fine wager, I guess." So what he did is that he turned himself into a seal. He swam with Sæmundur the whole way from Germany to Iceland. But Sæmundur, he was reading. He was standing on the back of a seal. It's like so absurd, actually. And he was just reading, like in the North Atlantic Ocean. And when he was close to the shore of Iceland, he took his book and he knocked out the seal with it. And of course, both of them sank, meaning that Sæmundur actually got wet. So Sæmundur, he won that fair and square. It was a trick, and I mean, devil was tricked, and the devil sometimes tricks and so on. So he actually ended up as a chieftain in this small town in the south of Iceland. This guy, he helped a lot of people. He was often tricking the devil. All of these stories is in some ways of how he was tricking the devil. Also, when he died, and after he died, it's said that if you have any illness, if you stay at his grave over the night, you will actually, like the day after, you will be with no illness at all. So he has like a very positive image when it comes to Icelanders. Also, this is way before actually when we became hysterical about sorcerers, devil, and so on, which was closer to 1600. Sorcery in Iceland has an old history. We have these runes that Vikings were doing, magic runes and so on. But the first person that was actually executed for sorcery was in the 14th century. There was a woman that was killed then. And I told you about her a little bit earlier. She killed her child, and it wasn't really a sorcery. But we became absolutely insane in the 17th century. This is the time that we became very religious. Iceland was, we were like borderline fanatics when it came to Christianity. We were like Lutherans becoming Protestants, and we believed that the devil was walking all around us, and that people were using sorcery to get their revenge on people. And this started in 1625. That's the first time that we burned someone for witchcraft. It was just a poor bastard. He was accused of exercising, like conjuring a ghost and sent him to his enemies. And like I said, they believed this in a very strong way. There are a lot of stories, of course, about these conjuring the ghosts and so on, and so it goes, of course. But it wasn't until around 1652 when, like, we got what we might just call a mass hysteria. We are here. You perhaps can see how snow is around me. We're like on the borders of the most isolated place in Iceland. Over there is Strandir. There is impossible to get there mostly over the winter. We tried to, like, we wanted to drive as long as we could, but we just didn't trust ourselves to go any further. We would basically just get stuck here, although we're on a fine car. So it's like, even the locals, we met a local actually on our way, and he just said, this is impassable, just turn around. So we're just going to go by that. But in the summer, of course, this is a wonderful place. But because it was so isolated, it meant that the paranoia in these small societies was even more. And for example, there was like this very famous story about burning man, always man, in Iceland and in Strandir. And the thing is that there was an odd moment. The moment was basically that a woman was working for a farmer, and then she was sent to another farm to work, but she became ill there. It's always about illness, by the way. And after being ill there, she went back to the former farmer. But then she got fine, absolutely fine. Now, a rumor was sparked. The rumor was that the farmer was actually like not a warlock, but like he was dabbing in sorcery. And therefore she became ill and then fine. Like a few weeks later, the young women that was in a mass in Strandir, they felt ill when they came into the church, and they were always burping. That was a part of it actually, and people were convinced that here someone was cursing people, putting some spells on them, and so on. So what they did is that they got a man to investigate this, and this was the sheriff in the area at the time. He was a young man. He was very new in his job. And he traveled all this way, you can imagine, perhaps easier on a horse, I don't know. But it takes us like, on a good day, it takes us at least like 1.5 hours just to drive this. In this weather, it's going to take us around like 4 hours just to get there. On a horse, it's probably going to be much worse. So the thing is that he actually rode all the way to Strandir, and he started to investigate. And his investigation led him to believe that this guy, this rumored farmer that I told you about in the beginning, that he might be a sorcerer. So people became more aggressive towards him and so on. And in the end, we had a very simple test, as I mentioned before, that the only way to be exonered by these accusations would be to have someone to tell the sheriff that he trusted this farmer and he knew that he would never be in sorcery or anything like that. But this was the 17th century, and people were paranoid. They didn't really know, and they didn't want to put their names to it. Like it would be a danger even for them also if they would be wrong, for example. So they were just like, we can't swear this, and therefore he failed on this test. So the sheriff actually, because there were no judges or anything around, this was like quite a complicated situation. It was so isolated. So they kind of just dragged these guys down to a beach where they burned him and also a friend of his. And his friend was he was very well known for actually using sorcery, and this was not he was basically into it, I think. But that's how the story goes, at least. So two of these men were actually burned in a rocky beach in Strandir, and it was horrible in so many ways. We wanted to show you just a typical Icelandic beach, because in Strandir, which we can't actually travel to, the beaches are a bit rockier, much rockier actually, but this is a good example of an Icelandic beach. And what we did in the 1700s is that we raised these bonfires in these beaches and we burned these people on places like this. It was basically for practical reasons. It was stony, nothing can burn grass or anything, and as well as, I mean, it was easy to turn it off, like turn out the flames afterwards, if anybody was interested in that. So the thing is, of course, this odd paranoia in Strandir because of the isolation didn't stop by burning these too many. It's never enough, actually, especially when there is like this insanity going on. So another man, the third man, was of course accused, and he was they found these evidence at his home. I mean, and when I talk about evidence, it's like some book that they thought was some magic book, runes and so on, and they burned him as well on a rocky beach exactly like this. And that didn't work either. So they have killed 3 people. Were they all innocent? Of course not. They were all guilty. They just thought that they were more in on it. So in the end, they basically they accused this young woman, and the young woman, she was incredibly afraid, of course, of all of this, because she knew her life was in stake. So what she decided to do was actually to flee from Strandir. And you can perhaps see the road there. This is the road that we were talking before. This is to Strandir, and it's around 100 kilometers over there. So it's like you can imagine for a woman, a young woman on a horse, just coming back. Let's say in the high winter, it's been a horrific journey, I think. When she got back to the civilization, basically, then she had some years to prove her innocence. But the thing is that it wasn't until years later, when she actually went for a judge, that they cleared her name. They said this was baseless. There were no evidence at all for this. And I mean, evidence or not, it didn't really matter at this time. But this is basically the best example in Iceland, the most famous and notorious examples about burning people and witchcrafting in Iceland. Because scholars just think this was like a massive mass hysteria within like a very small community, where rumors, paranoia, and everything was so strong that it was like unbearable, I think. So it shows how these small communities, especially in the west of Iceland, they were just all in when it came to burning each other or accusing each other of witchcraft. And often this was just for little or no reason. Perhaps just neighbors, they were fighting about some land, and then he just started a rumor about like witchcraft. So close to 1650 was the end of the era when it came to burning warlocks or people that were using magic in some ways. But the unlucky fellow that was actually the last one to be judged for this was Clemens. And he's from this beautiful town here. This is Hólmavík. This is kind of like the gate into the Westfjords. This is the last town you see before you go into the wild Westfjords, or if you want to go to Strandir. Please don't go there unless it's like summer and good weather. Also, anyways, Clemens was not a popular guy. It's always basically the ground for all of this. He was accused of like using sorcery to make a woman sick on a farm. But before that, he was accused of stealing like wood that have drifted into the beach close to the farm. He of course denied all of this. Both stealing this like wood, which was like very valuable at this time. It was a serious thing if you actually stole this. But he also said, of course, he did not use any sorcery against this woman. Sometimes people just get sick, right? But of course, sheriff or the magistrate, being just them with power, they basically did the test. Is anybody that is ready to say that this man is not using witchcraft? Of course, nobody said so. Nobody trusted themselves to vouch for the man. So he was actually sentenced to die by being burnt. But the thing is, of course, at this time, Icelanders were kind of starting to see through this. This man, of course, was not sentenced before because he was guilty. He was in custody for a year, and in the end, he confessed that he knew one like old like a witchcraft poet. And you say this poet if you have sheep, and it's like you just recite it, and it's supposed to protect the sheep. Nothing serious, but serious enough because of the allegations. So Clemus, he was actually sentenced to die, but when it came to it, they were supposed to burn him at Alþingi in Þingvellir, our parliament at the time. They changed the verdict that he should actually be exiled. And the man was exiled, and thankfully not just to the highlands here, he was exiled to Copenhagen, which in my opinion is actually one form of a punishment, but nah, okay, better weather at least. But as you can see, he's here. Here's a statue that the people of Hólmavík have of this man. And in the end, it's a good point if you read this platter here, if you visit here, that like these sentences were more or less about just like these people were not something that fitted very well into the society, and therefore they were accused of being not only different, but they must be a warlock or a witches or whatever, and therefore they were burnt. Of course, we have some forms of this today, not as extreme perhaps in most of the countries, but some countries surely do. So I don't know, but this man here, he was the end of burning warlocks in Iceland. But still, we had like 25 people have been killed because of this. This last story here is about Galdra Loftur, or Loftur the Warlock. Loftur was not a good guy, but this is one of the absolute best stories I've ever read when it comes to these like warlock stories. And it's also about how power just consumes you. Here's the thing. Before we go into Loftur, we have to explain a book. And this book is called Rauðskinna, or like the red book. Red skin is actually the exact translation, but it's nicknamed the Book of Power. This book actually was owned by a guy called Gottskálk the Cruel Nikulásarson. He was a bishop, this guy, and he wasn't really cruel. He was tough in business, and it was just like one of these tough guys. And he earned this nickname. Historians today, they say like he wasn't like torturing people or anything like that, but he was cruel. So this guy, for some reason, had this Book of Power, and this Book of Power entailed many secrets about sorcery, all of the biggest ones and the most important ones. But the reason it was very like sought after is because it entailed also the secret of like fighting the devil, not only winning him, but making him your slave. So this book was, of course, obviously something that all sorcerers ever wanted. But there was a problem also. When Gottskálk the Cruel died, he was buried with this book. When bishops at this time, like from 1000 and after that, they were often, almost always buried with their Bibles on them. And they were often with the cross, of course, and often also with staffs. So at least the beginning of it, remember this Book of Power. So Galdra-Loftur was a young guy. He was in Hólar, which was like a school, church school almost, like he was learning to be a priest. And this is all very like very much of Christianity, because the devil is there, magic and so on, which is often very connected to Christianity. So the thing is, of course, this guy also, he was in the school, and there are a few stories about him there. None of them very nice, so I'll just be warned. This guy was he was violent and nasty. So what he did actually, the first story is that there is a spell in Icelandic. It's called Gandreið. It's impossible to find a way to translate this, but just to explain it, it's like a sorcerer would take another person, transform it into a horse, beast, monster even, and then he would put a saddle on it, and he would actually ride that person, which had been transformed into a monster, the whole night. And now Loftur did this with a young servant, a girl, in that school, and he did this so violently that she was completely she was really badly injured after this. The spell also is a cunning one, because she couldn't even tell anyone what actually happened or who was responsible for her injuries. So Loftur obviously didn't really care about the servants. But wait, there is more. Loftur was actually, he was with this servant, he was sleeping with her, and she became pregnant. Loftur did not like this also. She was a servant, not good enough for our Loftur the Warlock. So what he did actually, he decided to kill her. Pretty basic thing, right? So instead of just stabbing her or something like that, he put a spell where there was she took the dishes and she brought them to the people that were to the pupils. But when she was getting one dish, Loftur actually conjured a spell, so the wall opened up, and it showed the dish inside, so she would have to go and get the dish. But the girl, the servant, she wasn't an idiot. She felt that there was something off, so she watched this and she hesitated. But the spell was so powerful that it dragged her violently into the closet, and into the wall, and the wall completely closed off. The story says it goes like this, that decades later, when they were renovating this house, this school, they actually opened up this wall and they found the skeleton of the woman, and inside of her, the unborn baby. So, Loftur, not a good guy, right? So, here's the thing. Loftur, where are we? It's impossible to walk here. So, Loftur now, he actually, he becomes quite skilled in sorcery. I mean, he can obviously open up walls, and the walls can drag people into it, and so on. And he can change people into monsters, write them like a madman. And so, one night he goes to his schoolmate, and he talks to him. And he tells his schoolmate and asks him if he can help him, because he needed to go and do some necromancy. So the necromancy was basically, he wanted to conjure dead bishops, among them, of course, Gottskalk, the cruel. So he tells his mate, he said yes to this. The reason he said yes to this is because Loftur has been changing into a very violent person last semester. All of his mates were starting to fear him. He was very good in magic. He was becoming very cruel when it came to his mate, and he was feared, basically. So there he said, okay, fine, what do you want me to do? And he said, and Loftur told him, and he explained to him also why he needed this book of power from Gottskalk, and he was going to conjure him. And the thing is, he said, I know everything that you need to know about magic, and the only way for us, for me, to not end up in hell under the power of the devil is to basically beat the devil and make him my slave. So he really needed this book because he was very scared that he would end up in hell. So the pupil said, fine. So the thing is that, and you've often perhaps seen these patterns in these stories, and that the only thing that this pupil needed to do was basically stand by the church bell in a church where they would conjure these bishops, and when Loftur gave him the sign, he was supposed to ring the bell, and then the ghost would actually disappear, because ghosts for some reason hate the bell ringing. Galdra Loftur, or Loftur the Warlock, went with his mate straight to this church, of course in the night. Now, the purpose was necromancy. This was not an easy task, actually. So what he did is that he went into the pulpit, stood there, and he started his witchcrafty or sorcery, or however you would put that, actually. And while he was doing that, his mate stood like close by, and he held the bell, and he was waiting for the sign from Galdra Loftur. So Loftur started, and all of a sudden an old ghost came up, and this was the first bishop in Iceland, the Christian bishop from somewhere around 1100. He had a golden crown in his head, on his head. He had a staff and a cross, and also a Bible. Yeah. We're in Hólmavík. There's actually some kind of a traffic here, I guess. This is the Museum of Witchcraft, and I don't know, it's a fun fact actually. You call this popsicles, no, icicles, right? But we call this the grílas candles, or grílukerti. It's like candles of ice, and Grýla, of course, is the troll mother of the Julelads, and she eats children. But you know this, all of this. Back to Loftur. So Loftur was there. The first ghost is coming in. This was the first bishop, and this was terrifying, of course. The first bishop, he actually told Loftur that he should stop whatever he was doing. He said, you do not want to hear the crushing prayers of the other bishops, the Christian bishops. It could paralyze you. But Loftur, of course, being quite arrogant, he knew everything, and his soul was at stake also. He believed that, like, fiercely. So he kept on going. The next bishops, they came in also, 3 of them, now. They also had this, some of them had golden crowns, some of them didn't. It kind of like means that some of them were more important than others, basically. But all of them had cross, they always had Bible, these guys were always buried with their Bibles, and they had staff, of course, also. But all of a sudden, the sky started rumbling, and even the church as well, and there was someone was coming in. So, all of a sudden, this guy came in, Gottskálk the Cruel, the bishop, and he definitely had a crown on his head, but he didn't have a Bible, and he didn't have a cross. He had the rauðskinna, or the red skin, and this book, of course, was the book that Loftur wanted from the beginning. So, what Loftur did is that he kept on doing his prayers, but Gottskálkur, he watched mockingly at Loftur as he stood in the pulpit, and he said to him, this is a really nice song that you're singing, but you need to have it much stronger if you want to defeat a man like me. So this ghost was obviously, he knew what Loftur was up to, and he was up for a fight, right? So what happened then is that Loftur, he was so, this was so hard on him that, and also just, it feels like when you read this story, like everything was trembling, everything was like, this was like taking like an unimaginable toll of Loftur, as well as the ghost himself, Gottskálkur, and they were fighting there. Loftur was reciting the Lord's Prayer actually, and used this as a weapon when it came to this. Like, I don't know how that worked, but I mean, that was a thing, I guess. But the thing is that this basically forced the bishop to come closer and closer and closer to Loftur. And Loftur tried to get closer to the bishop, but this was really hard. But all of a sudden, the bishop, he hands out the book. So Loftur, he was like out with his hand, and he could almost touch the end of the book. But as he was going to take it, he gave his mate a signal, so he rang the church bell. And of course, the ghost went straight into the ground again. But Loftur, he miscalculated. He wasn't as close to the ghost as he thought. So Gottskálkur took his book back down to his grave. So all was lost, basically. What happened next is that he was so done, like he couldn't, like he was crushed mentally and physically after this ordeal, and he was insanely scared with darkness, and this meant that he had to have some help. And he knew about this priest, and this priest was said to have the ability to heal everyone with his hand that have been touched by magic. So he went to this priest, and the priest tried to help him, but that didn't really work at all. But nonetheless, he felt better in his presence. So Loftur stayed with him for a few months, and finally, when he felt like he was actually getting his physics back, as well as his mind, basically, he decided to go out for just sailing in a beautiful day. It was like sunny, like today, and he just took this boat. He got it as a loan from a friend, and he sailed out. But now, here comes the spooky part. There is a price to pay always for so much power, I guess. So as he was sailing out, a witness said that they saw like a very big grey and furry hand come out of the deep of the ocean, grabbing the end of the boat and dragging him down with him to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean and even further, right? Because, well, the devil was after him. So what this story basically tells us is, of course, how power can absorb you and how Galdra-Loftur, he didn't trick the devil like Sæmundur, but he was basically crushed by the devil and his own power in the end. This is the end of the series of Supernatural Iceland, series number 1, of course. You can still find a ton of stuff, of course, to watch on our YouTube channel. And also, I want to tell you a little bit about this. If you really want to know something about sorcery, this is a fantastic book, an old book. It's from the early 1900s, and it's about basically the rune staffs that we have done, like it's magical runes, and it's brilliant in that way. It's just, you can see all the runes, what they're about, and so on. And they're all, the man that actually got them was, what was his name? I can't even remember, but the man that actually got them, he collected them out of the old manuscripts in Iceland, like the ones that are so famous, of course. And you can find this book in our shop at grapevine.is. So, yeah. But thanks for watching. It's been wonderful to actually revisit these stories. They have surprised me in many ways. Some of them are, of course, brilliant. Some of them are not. But I love them all, and it's weird, and I hope it gives you a small insight in the Icelandic culture and our folklore elements. So, yeah, thanks for watching.